Hello, good people, and welcome to Finance Skills Hub. Here we learn, we connect, and we grow. Well, this is an exciting one. This is a full Excel dashboard video. Here we want to show you the powerful features in Excel that allow you to do business intelligence and data analytics. So you learn how to get data, transform, and shape using Power Query. If you are using several tables in your analysis, how to use Power Pivot to connect these tables together and create a relationship so you can have access to all the tables at a go. You also learn how to create measures using DAX, a very powerful way to create calculations independent of pivot tables, so you can have access to these measures and then use them in your dashboard. Then you learn how to create cube formulas. It's a very flexible alternative when you want to redesign your staging pivot tables for your dashboard. Now, apart from these, you'll learn how to use your regular pivot tables, pivot chart slicers, to create an interactive dashboard that allows your user to slice and dice and also updates when the original data source updates as well. Well, if this case study is not exactly what you use at the office, I'm sure there are a lot of tips and tricks that you can use to improve what you already do at the office. There's a lot to do here. Join me in Excel and let's work on this step by step. Okay, so we are going to begin with two data sets, actual and budget. Now, from these two data sets, we'll do some calculations using pivot tables and then end up with this interactive dashboard. Right now, what this dashboard gives us is an overview of the performance of each department. In a typical budgeting dashboard, we have departments that are cost centers. As you can see, accounts, corporate, finance, all these are cost centers, right? Sales and marketing is a profit center. So for each of these departments, we'll compare their total budget against their total actual. If there's a positive variance, it shows a green with their balance. But if there's a negative variance, it shows a red with their balance. Okay. Now, this dashboard allows you to also switch between actual and budget. Okay, so for each department, you can switch between actual and budget. You can also view this at organizational level if you have not selected any slicer. Again, you also see to your right the performance of each department, how much they have achieved so far. That is to the donut chart here. Now below are some summary tables that give us a bit more detailed view by account. So for each account, this is a typical income statement layout. We have our sales coming in where we compare our sales with all the outflows and then calculate a net position. Okay, this we have given the three icon set. So for sales that are above 67% for each department, there's a green icon. We reverse the logic for all the expenses and then we have our net position also here. Then each month's inflows and outflows is broken down here. Again, with this one, we can switch between actual and budget to have a view of the two scenarios. So this is what we hope to achieve. Now, you know that when you are creating dashboards like these, the idea is to start off by creating your measures, which are your calculations. Our main calculations are going to be total, actual, total budget, and then our variance. For just these numbers, it will not be insightful for our users. So we'll have to give our users something to break down our calculations, and that is where we use these slicers. So for the department slicer, for the scenario slicer, and then for these account names, and then for our months, we are going to create special dimension tables that will be used to break down our calculations, that is our actual budget and then our variance. So we are going to walk through the schema that is going to help us appreciate how this is going to be done. So we'll start off with our actual and budget data. Then from these two, we'll convert them into tables. Tables allow us to store data in a structured way. We can also use the names easily in our calculations. Now, we are going to put these two data sets together in Power Query. So in Power Query in Excel, we are able to shape and transform the data. When we put these two tables together, our goal is to draw a unique list of departments. Okay, we also have a unique list of categories or accounts, And then we'll also have a scenario switch between actual or budget, and also dates. Remember, these tables, we call them dimension tables, allow us to break down our calculations. So whether we are using slicers, we are using filters, or using them in charts, we need to first have these tables to help us break down our calculations. Then we'll have our fact tables, actual and budget. This is going to help us create our calculations. Okay, so the labels that you see in green are called dimension tables, and then the ones that you have the yellow icons against are called the fact tables. These are going to work together to give us the final dashboard. Now, when we create these tables, they are independent. So go to Power Pivot to create what we call a data model. In the data model, we'll put all these tables together so that they can talk to each other, right? We connect them using what we call a common relationship. Right? That way, we can now create one pivot table that has access to all these tables. From the pivot table, we'll now create our basic calculations using DAX. To give us flexibility in our design and calculations, we'll also create cube formulas. This is going to complete our calculations, and then from our calculations and staging, we'll create our interactive charts and then use slicers to break down our calculations. Then we'll now create our dashboard. Now this dashboard will still communicate to our data source such that if there are updates to our original table, okay, when we refresh, all updates will now reflect in our dashboard. So that's the process we are going to use. From this point, we'll open our two data sets and then begin the process. So we'll begin with our actual data. Now the actual data has dates, it has account codes, account name, department, and then an amount column. Now this amount column has a mix of negative and positive numbers. So for the profit centers like sales and marketing, we have positive numbers, and then for the cost centers, we have negative numbers, right? You may have downloaded this from your ERP or your CRM system, or you may have recorded this yourself. What is important here is that the data is structured, okay? Now when we switch to the budget side, we have a similar structure. Dates, the green for the dates is month, year level, typical budgeting style we do at monthly level. Then the account codes with the corresponding account names are here. Then the departments, okay? And then we also have a mix of inflows and outflows here. Sometimes the budget orientation is horizontal, but this one is a vertical structure, right? So same departments, same account names on the other side. Now, the first thing we are going to do is to convert these two data sets into tables. Tables allow us to store the data in a structured way. To do that, you can stand in any cell in the data range, right? Go to Insert, and then you find Table here. You could also use Control T to get this done. So I'll do that. Now my table has been inserted. You see the Table Design tab pop up here. So we click on Table Design, you come to Table Name, and then you name it appropriately. We call this Actual. Okay. Now I'm going to do same for the budget side. So I'll stand in here. This time I'll use Control T, click OK. Then the Table Design, I'm going to have budget here. Right. So these two tables have been named. The next thing I'm going to do is to load the tables into Power Query, where our goal will be to combine them so that we can have access to all the departments, all the account names, right? And then we'll do analysis from there. To load into Power Query, you can stand in any of the tables and then come to the Data tab, right? So in the Data tab, you can initiate Power Query from here. This is Power Query. We get data from many sources. For this example, we are already standing in the table. So in the Data tab, we'll use the icon table/range. So I'll stand here and then click in the table/range icon. Now, Power Query loads. You'll notice that my actual table has appeared here. And then in the main grid, I see the columns that I loaded. To the far right, there are steps that will show you every step in your transformation. We are here to transform and shape the data. There are only two steps here: the source, where we got the data from, and then this second one that's applied the data type to each column, right? I'm going to take advantage of this source code, okay, where it shows me where the data came from. So you notice that there's an actual name over here. I'm going to take advantage of this copy. Instead of jumping out of Power Query to now start the process again, I'll take advantage of this formula, come to new source, other sources, and then start a new blank query, right? So this way I can paste this formula here and change the name of the table from actual to budget, right? Power Query is case sensitive, so please make sure you use the right case every time. Then I'm going to press enter, right? So this now brings my budget table. Let me name this properly. So I'll go to the properties and then name this budget, right? It's always important to pay attention to the data type, right? The columns that you have, and assign the right data type to each. So this is a date, so you have to properly assign dates to this, okay? It will want me to replace the current step. So this has been done, right? Now, we are going to combine these two queries, okay? So actual and budget together. But before we combine, we need a column that will help us identify which lines are actual, which lines are budget, right? To be able to do that in Power Query, we are going to use the Add Column tab. In the Add Column tab, we have the option to use the custom column. So I'll choose the custom column, which is going to initiate the process to add a new column to the far right. The column header I'm going to use here is called scenario. Okay, now the formula is just going to be labels. So I just need labels in each cell to show me that these are actual lines. So I'll just put actual in double quotes. So you type actual in double quotes and click OK. Please pay attention to the data type and then assign text to this when this is added. Repeat the same process for budget. So for budget, I'll come here, add column, custom column, okay, and I'm going to call this scenario as well. So here I'll assign the budget label to this and then click OK. So again, this is going to be text, so I'll assign this text to it. Okay, so we now have our data set ready for combination or appending, right? So we are able to combine or append them because they have the same headers. Now to do the appending, I'll come to home, okay, in the combine group, you see append queries over here. So I'll choose append queries as new. Append queries as new will bring this dialog box that will help me choose my first table and my second table. The order doesn't matter, so I'll choose budget and then I'll choose actual in the second table. Then I'll click OK. So when I click OK, I now get my combined data, which is called append 1. Now the reason we are doing this is there are situations where you make provisions for departments in the budget, they don't spend at all, or vice versa. So with this appended table, when you draw your department or account codes, you are sure you have the full list. And that's why we are going through this process. So let's call this reference, right? We are naming this reference because we are going to use this as source to draw all the dimension tables. Okay, to be sure everything is in place, you can go to the far right in the scenario. When you click on the filter icon, okay, you see that you have actual and budget here, right? When I load more, right, I have this clean set, right? Choose cancel so you don't add a new step to this. So from this reference table, I'm now going to first right click and then choose reference. Reference creates a copy of your reference table but maintains a link to the original source, so that changes will pass through and then update easily in your final dimension table. Now for this first reference table, we want to draw the unique list of departments. So I'll select the department, right click, and remove all other columns, right? So I'll remove all other columns. That leaves me with only department. This has duplicates, so I'll right click again and remove duplicates. Okay, so this now gives me the unique list of departments. So I'll name this properly, call this departments. Okay, this way I can even create a slicer or use it in my chart. Okay, now next up, we are going to repeat the process for the rest of the dimension table. So right click and then reference. So here we are going to extract the account code and account name. These two move together, right? So one is a lookup of the other. So I'll select these two together and then right click, okay, and remove other columns. So I have only these two, right? So for the account code and account name, I also have duplicates here. So I'll highlight the two, right click and remove duplicates. So this way I now have my unique account codes and account names. So these are going to be used as categories. I'll name them categories. Okay. Then the next dimension table is the scenario switch, right? So for every slicer that you saw in the final dashboard, we are going to make provision for it. So I'll right click this again and then reference, right? This time around, I'll come to the far right. I have scenario here, right click and remove all other columns and remove duplicates. Okay, so this now gives me the two types of scenarios to switch between actual and budget. So I'll name this scenario. Okay, so this is my third dimension table. Now the fourth dimension table is going to be a table that has dates. Remember, in our final dashboard, we were able to break down by month. You always need a table that has all the dates in your actual and budget table, right? The first action we did was to budget, which happened on the 1st of January 2019. Then we started spending all the way to 31st December 2019. We need a table that captures all the dates in this range, 1st January 2019 to 31st December 2019, and has every day in there, right? So to be able to capture this, we are going to create a custom table, okay, using a formula. So I'll right click and start a new query. Okay, so new query, other sources, and then start a blank query, right? The logic is pretty simple. We come into the budget table and then grab the earliest dates and then create a date series daily all the way to the latest action in the actual table, which will capture the latest dates. To do that, we are using this formula called number.from, right? So number.from will stamp the start date. To get that start date, I'll open my bracket and then use this function list.min, which will grab the minimum or earliest date, right? The minimum or earliest date is coming from the budget table, so I'll put in the budget table, right? To get a column that has the dates, I'll bring a square bracket and then put in date. Okay, so this is the formula that will stamp the start dates. Close my bracket for list.min, close my bracket for number.from, right? So this formula I'm going to copy. It's going to be a similar formula for the maximum side or the latest date. Before that, I'll bring two dots, okay, for the date range, and then paste this. So the change I'm going to do here is that instead of list.min, I'm going to do list.max, which brings the latest date. Remember, I'm rather grabbing this from the actual table, right? Most likely your latest activity will come from the actual table. So I'll put in dates for this as well, right? So number.from list.min, budget date, two dots, number.from list.max, actual date, right? Now this is going to generate a list, but before I do that, I'll stand right after the equal sign, bring a curly bracket, and then go to the end and also bring a curly bracket. Okay, now press enter. So this now generates a list of dates for me. I'll come to the far left and convert this into a table. Okay, there's nothing to do here, just click OK. This now begins the process to create what we call a calendar table. So what you have here is the primary column, which contains dates. So I'll name this dates. Okay, if we change the data type from ABC123 to dates, you notice that it has all my daily dates, right? To be sure, you can come to the View tab and then check the column profile. Okay, you realize that it contains all the 365 days in the year from 1st January to 31st December. Right, so that way we know that we have not missed any dates in our actual and budget data sets. From here, you can now draw the date attributes that you need for your analysis. So if your dashboard requires year, you can draw it, month, you can draw it, and so on. So here, I'm going to go to Add Column, which brings new columns. And then in the date icon, I'm going to extract year, okay? We really didn't use this, but just to show you how it works. Then I'll come to dates again, and then I'm going to draw the month. Now this month label brings you the month values 1 to 12, right? It's going to be used to sort our month names properly later, right? So we now come back to our dates, and then this time around we'll draw our name of month, which is the last option here. Okay, so this is our month name. Now, to make it easier for our charting and breakdown, we want to truncate or abbreviate this to just the first three characters. So I'm going to transform this. I don't want a new column, so I'll switch from Add Column to Transform. Right, over here you see Extract, right? So I'll choose first characters and then put in my count, which is 3. And then here, I now have my month name. So this is going to be my calendar table. So I'm going to name this calendar table. Right. So we are all set. We have drawn our 4-dimension tables, which will be used to break down our calculations. Then we have our 2 fact tables, actual and budget. This reference query is going to be a helper query. We are not going to load it into the data model. So disconnect it when it loads. So from this point, you can now come to Home, Close and Load, but choose Close and Load too, right? Which will give you options for loading. So when this loads, you realize that you now have the option to load this as a connection. You are work in progress, you are not done yet. So this will hold it in memory. Then we'll add all these queries to the data model where we'll connect them, right? And then you click OK. So it will now go through the process to load, okay? Now when it's finished loading, you can confirm the number of rows that were loaded. So again, we have our calendar 365. For the reference, we are not going to load this, so I'll right click and then change the load to type and then disconnect this from the data model and click OK. I'll ignore this warning. Okay. So next up, we are now going into the data model in Power Pivot to connect our tables. So where can we find Power Pivot? So if you haven't used Power Pivot at all, you have to launch it for the first time, right? So data, and in the data tools group, you find this icon here. When you click on it, it activates Power Pivot for the first time. Once you close that pop-up, you now have Power Pivot tab here, right? So in the Power Pivot, we'll access it using Manage. Okay, so when you go to Manage, you notice that all our tables are here. So actual, budget, departments, as we loaded them, right? There are 2 views, the data view and the diagram view. When I switch to the diagram view, I get a visual representation of all our tables, right? So these 2 are fact tables. Typically, we bring them below to create what we call a star schema. All our calculations will come from these 2 tables. Then when we calculate, we'll break down using departments, category. Okay, you can move these around, just click in the white space. Okay, so I just want all of them in view. Right, so this is what we have. Now this way, we are going to connect them using the common relationship. Right, so we'll begin with the actual table. So if you take the actual table, we have departments, okay, the unique list of departments going into the department on the other side. So I'll click this and then drag it and connect it to this one. Okay, then for categories and actual, the common connection here is account code, but you also have account name here. When it happens like this, you use the column that has the most granular units. Okay, so from account codes we get account name. Okay, so this is the one at atom level. So I'll take this one and then connect to account code. Then for scenario, we will now come here. I'll take scenario and then connect it to scenario over here. Okay, and then finally for the calendar, I'll take date and then connect it to the dates column here. Okay, so this way, every calculation I do for my actual table can be broken down by these dimension tables. Let's repeat the process for budget. So again, dates will connect dates in the calendar table, and then I'll connect account code to account code. Okay, come down here and then connect scenario to the scenario, and then finally department to my department. Right, so this is my complete data model. Now usually, to make it easier for the user, the columns that are present in the dimension and fact tables can create confusion, right? So if you take an example, in this department column, there's a unique list of departments. This is called the primary key. And then the counterpart here, which is the foreign key, has duplicate entries of departments. When we are breaking down, we prefer to break down with this and not that. So to make it easier for your user, you can hide all the duplicate columns in the fact table, right? So I'm going to select account code, hold control, account name, okay, department, and the scenario over here. So that leaves me with only date and amount. I'll right click this and then hide from client tools, so that it doesn't even pop up for us to choose in our slicer, right? I'll repeat same for the budget. Okay, right click and then I'll hide from client tools as well. Okay, so this now completes our connection in the data model. Now right from here we have the option to insert a pivot table. Okay, so this pivot table can now be inserted in a new worksheet. So let me insert this in a new worksheet. Enable content. Right, so we have this. Now you notice that from the data model, you now have access to all the tables, right? So you have active and all. From here, we should be able to calculate our total actual and then our total budget. Okay. Now, somebody would argue, why are we not using the amount over here? You see, when we drag this amount into the value section, we create something called an implicit measure. This would always have to ride on a pivot table structure. We need the sum of actual and sum of budget as independent calculations or measures, so that we can easily have access to them in further calculations or when we create our cube formulas. Right, so next up, we are going to create our calculations. So to do the calculation, I'm going to come to Power Pivot, okay, then we'll create measures, right? So this is the measures icon, and I'll start a new measure over here. So the measure can sit in any of the tables. In some cases, you can create a dedicated table to host all your measures. So this measure is going to be called actual, right? So from here, I can create a simple formula that sums, okay, all the numbers in the actual, right? So actual is a table, amount is the column, right? So here, you can format your numbers appropriately. So I'll choose 1000 separator, 0 decimal place, okay? So the expectation is that once I click OK, this will now give me the total net position for actual. I'll repeat the process for budget. So I'll come to Power Pivot and then start a new measure. So this time around, if you like, you can even place it in the budget table, and then we'll name this budget. So again, Same process, sum budget amount, close brackets. Format this appropriately using 1,000 separator. Okay, and then I'll click OK. All right. So we are now comparing our actual and budget net numbers. Okay. Now from this point, we want to build the staging for our dashboard. If you notice in our final dashboard, we broke our final budget and actual numbers down by sales, okay, and then by month, right? So we'll come into our list of tables in the pivot table and then look for the categories. So in the categories, you notice that I have my account code and account name over here. So I'll drag account name to the left. I now have my account names over here. Then I'll break this down further on the column side using my month names. So I'll come to calendar, choose month name, right? Place it on top of values. Okay, so this is what you have, right? Now you notice from this structure that we have a sorting problem. So first, the months are not sorted properly. And then you also notice that our labels are also not sorted properly. The way we arrange this, we want the sales to be on top and then followed by the outflows. Same for our month names, starting from January, we want to go all the way to December. We can sort this properly by going back to Power Pivot. Okay, so in Power Pivot, when we go to manage, okay, this time around, I'm coming to the data view so that I can see the data in a columnar structure. So I'll come first to the calendar table. In the calendar table, this is my month name. It's not sorted properly. I'm going to write on the arrangement I have in the month values, which is 1 to 12, to sort this properly. So we highlight this, come to sort by, choose sort by column, and then choose the column that you want to sort by, right? So I'm sorting this by month. I'll click OK. Okay, so this will take effect when I come back to my pivot table. Then we go to the accounts or categories. Same situation here. These are our account names. Again, we want to sort this properly. So we sort it by the account code. Okay, so I'll sort this by the account code. So typical accounting systems, you always use account codes to order your account labels. Now I'll exit. So once I exit, you now notice that this has been sorted properly. Right. Now in our final dashboard, we had two slices, scenario and department. Right. So now that your pivot table is in place, you can now insert these two slices. Standing in the pivot table, I'll come to slicer. Okay. All my tables are here. So it gives me a list of all the tables. Sometimes not all of them are present, so you can switch to all. Okay. So here, my first slicer is coming from scenario, and then my second slicer is coming from department, right? So I'll click OK. So this now gives me my scenario slicer and my department slicer. When these come, we can format them properly or break them down into columns. Okay, so I'll select my scenario slicer and then break this down into 2 columns. And then for my department, I'll do same and then break this down into 7, representing the unique labels that I have here. So these are now my 7 departments. Okay, let me insert some rows up here. Alt-IR F4 to insert some rows. Then I can easily drag my slicers in place. Okay, so now that we have our pivot table and our slicers in place, which is actually the main structure of our dashboard, we want to make this pivot table flexible. Okay, the arrangement is such that we want the totals in front and the month labels to the far right. The thing with pivot tables is that you can't insert or change the structure, right? So if I try to insert columns, okay, it becomes a problem. So what we're going to basically do is to convert this pivot table into cube formulas, right? when we convert to cube formulas, it still maintains connection to our slices. We can slice and dice as we want. To do that, we can come to pivot table analyze. Under the OLAP tools, because we pass this to the data model, we have the option to convert this to formulas. Okay, so when I click convert to formulas, you realize that it maintains the shape of the pivot table, but now I have formulas behind all the numbers that I see here. Okay, this also responds to our slices. Okay, so our actual and budget switch still works. Okay, if I select by department too, it also filters this as well. Okay, the reason we did this was to be able to reorder or arrange the columns that we see over here. If you look at our final dashboard, okay, we had the total, actual, and budget in front. Okay, we want to maintain that same structure, so I'll come all the way to the end. Then we have our total, actual, and total budget over here. I'll highlight these two, right click, cut, and then come all the way to the left. Okay, and then insert these two over here. Okay, so this way I now have my main structure right here. Okay, so this is the main staging for our final dashboard. The labels that don't have formulas behind them, you can always delete them. Okay, now even though these are formulas, okay, if you refresh or you add new data sets to your original source, when you refresh, they will update over here if it falls within the original structure. But if it doesn't, you can always write cube formulas to extend, example, new labels that you have brought in and all that. Now, the next thing that we are going to do is to fill in the gaps in our months. Okay, so you realize that the month names are only on the actuals, so we need to fill in these gaps. We can do that easily by selecting the entire range all the way to December. Okay, now to highlight the gaps in here, I'm going to press F5. Okay, so function F5 will bring me to the go to dialog box. Okay, then Alt S for the special button. Okay, and then select blanks. Okay, so this is going to highlight just the blanks in my labels. While these cells are selected, I'll press the equal sign and then select the cell to my left. Okay, then you press Control Enter. Right, so this time, when you do this properly, you realize that you now have the pair of labels for each month on actual and budget. Okay, so this is going to be the staging for our pivot table. From here, we'll now do our calculations to complete the rest of our dashboard. So this is just a quick check-in to see how you're doing. If you have made it this far, I'm sure you appreciate how powerful these tools are. So far, you've seen how you can use Power Query to get data, transform, draw your dimension tables and your fact tables. You've learned how to create a calendar table. Then in Power Pivot, you learned how to create a data model, connect these tables so that you can have access to them. Well, these tools are not just limited to actual and budget. There's a lot more you can do with them. If you're a game and then you want to build more case studies, then I encourage you to get my book, Data Modeling with Microsoft Excel. It offers you a comprehensive step-by-step guide on how to use these tools to create a sales dashboard. Okay, so the link is available on Amazon. You can get a copy and then practice with exercise files to also build your proficiency using these tools. In the second half of the video, we are going to learn how to create measures, how to create cube formulas, and then ultimately learn best practices with how to create and lay out your dashboard. We'll talk about color combination, themes, and how to format your slices so that you can actually make it easier for your user to grab the key insights you want to communicate. So let me not bore you. Let's get on with our work and finish this dashboard. Okay, so now that we've set the stage for our main dashboard, the next thing we are going to do is to create the staging for our trend chart. Okay, so the trend chart has the month labels. It offers us the ability to switch between actual and budget. Okay, so to create that calculation, let's put in the labels actual and budget. Okay, and then I'll create the labels for the 12 months over here, right? So I'll take this all the way to N. Now for our calculation, we are going to use cube formulas. Okay, so if you look at the current position, what I need is to draw the actual for January. Okay, and then make provision for this calculation to be sliced by scenario and the department. So to do that, we are going to use a function called cube value. Basically, cube value draws your measures from your data model. Remember, we created two measures, which is the sum of all the actual numbers and the sum of the budget numbers. So we use a cube value to draw these measures. Now, it requires the connection, so you bring a double quote, which will activate your data model. You tap, you close your double quote, so this would connect it to the data model. Then you bring a comma, and then you give it some expressions, which could be your measures or your dimensions, right? So I'll bring a double quote. You realize that it lists all the sides of my data model, right? So here I'll go straight to measures, okay, because I'm interested in grabbing the actual measure. So when I tab it, I'll bring a dot, then it gives me the two measures, actual and budget, and then I'll close my square bracket. So this is my actual measure. That's my first expression. I'll bring the comma. I want this broken down by the month January, right? So I'll go back to the data model and then bring a double quote. This time around, my destination is in the calendar table because that's where the month names are, right? I'll bring a dot to give me the next level in the hierarchy. Here, I'm looking for month name. Okay, so month name, then I'll bring a dot. So after month name, right, the child here, I'll bring a square bracket, it's J, and for this purpose, I'm typing it in. I'll come and correct this and link it to the cell later, right? I'll close my square bracket. Then I'll conclude with my double quote, right? So with this, I can now grab my actual and then break down by month. We also want this to be broken down or filtered by the slicer. So I'll bring a comma and then introduce my slicer department, and then also introduce my slicer scenario. Okay, so this is my original formula. Now, it gives me the actual for January, which is 9 million, but I want to copy this formula right and down. That will only be possible if I link it to the cells to my left and then on top. So to do that, this actual expression here, I'm going to clean it in the square bracket, bring a double quote, bring an ampersand, okay, and then select this label, okay. Now, when you do that, you bring another ampersand and then a double quote. So your full expression is going to be the double quote, ampersand, cell selection, ampersand, double quote, right? So this way, you can easily link it to cells. Now, I want to copy this right, so I'm going to lock column B, okay, so that it doesn't move to the right with me. I'm going to do same for the January reference here. So I'll come clean January and then bring a double quote, bring an ampersand, select this one, okay, and then bring another ampersand, and then I have a double quote here. So again, because I want to be copying down, I'll be locking row 28. Okay, so F4 to lock row 28. Right, so basically what I've calculated here is, so I'm going to select and then press Ctrl R. Okay, so Ctrl R will give me the breakdown for each. Come down and then Ctrl D for the budget as well, right? So this is going to be the staging for my charts. If I select the whole of this, I'll come to Insert and then come to my recommended charts. Okay, it will suggest this line charts, right? So I'll stick to it, but I want the line charts that has the markers. So I'll choose this one instead. Okay, so this is what I have. Okay, now what we really want is if we select a particular scenario. So let's say I select actual, it shows me only actual, but this line is still showing for budgets, right? It's not a very neat way to present it. So we need to modify our calculation in such a way that it doesn't plot these cells, right? Even though they are blank, the Excel chart would only not show lines when you have NAs in them, right? So we need to modify this formula so that we have NAs. Now let's test the logic we are going to use for this. So if we test for is blank, right, you notice that if I run it on this one, it says it's false, and then this is also false. So is blank is not a very good logical function to test blank cells when you are using cube formulas. So instead of is blank, you can use is non-text, okay? So if there's a value there, it will give you true, but if there's no value there, it's going to give you false, right? So we take advantage of this logic to test and then assign the NAs to the appropriate cells. So this means that we'll come and then modify our original formula. So I'll come in here. Let me do this in the formula bar to make it easy. So here I would say that if the calculation that I have done, so is non-text, so the whole of this, okay, the whole of this is non-text, right? So this entire value, right, if it's non-text, that is, it gave us a value, then let me copy this, and I want you to comma bring that whole calculation, right? So let me paste everything. There's a security feature, right? So this is the calculation that I want, right? Otherwise, if it doesn't, then bring an NA. So NA, open close bracket, okay? Then I'll close my final bracket. So this is the modified version, and I'm going to press enter, okay? So with this, I can now copy, Control Shift right, Control R, Control D, right? So now you notice that our chart now displays only actual when we select actual, and then only budgets when we select budgets, right? So that's a neat way to show our charts. Now, the next calculation that we are going to do is to show the percentage achieved for each department, okay? So you notice that if I select a particular department, it shows me their progress, okay? So for operations, they've spent 82%, right? For sales and marketing, they've overachieved. So that's how come I have this full circle, 104%, right? So for that calculation, we are basically going to repeat our labels, actual and budget, okay? But this time around, we are going to use a simple cube value that is basically going to grab the measure. So this workbook data model, okay? So the measure that we are interested in is what we did earlier. So I would come in here and then reference this, okay? So ampersand, double quotes, close square bracket, double quotes, okay? So this is for my measure, right? Now we want this to only be sliced by the slicer department, okay? So this is what we have. So at this point, you realize that this is going to give me my actual. When I copy down, it gives me the budget. So when I calculate this, you realize that if I bring my slicer close, it's responsive to the department that I select. Okay, so that's how this is going to work. Now, what we basically want is that if you take like accounts, right, we allocated 3.3 million for them to spend, okay? They've only spent 3.1, okay? So we want to calculate the percentage, okay, which ideally should be actual divided by budget, okay? So this gives us 93% control shift percentage, right? So for the remainder, this is going to be 1 minus this, and then I have 6%, right? So this works if we are able to chart this. I'll highlight this, go to insert, and then choose my donut charts over here. Okay, so you realize that this gives me the 94% that I'm looking for. The challenge, however, is that when the department that we've selected overspends or overachieves, okay, right, this should be a full circle, right? So this is not really a good depiction of what is happening here. So we need to now tweak this formula to have a full circle when the actual exceeds 100%, right? So to do that, we'll create a new formula to the right. We'll make this min. So min is the cap is going to be 100% or whatever has been selected here. Okay, so this way I will have 100%, okay, and then my remainder is going to be 0. So these new labels will now be better for our charts, right? So instead of relying on this one, we'll just switch to this one. So in the event that they overspend, there's a full circle, okay? So if you come back to account, you realize that we have our 94%, and then when I switch to any other that has more than 100%, we have the labels, which will give us our full circle. So this is what we are going to be using for our final donut charts over here. So now that we are done with our calculation, the last set of calculations will be to bring in the icon for the positive variance and the negative variance, right? So what we've done here is for the departments that have a positive variance comparing actual and budget, right? We have a plus icon here. I updated this. You can use any icon that you have. Okay, so we are going to take advantage of Excel's image in cell feature. Okay, so if sales has a positive variance, it's a plus. If project has a negative variance, you have this minus here, right? So it's interactive to give users an easier way to compare the actual and then the budget. So let's see how we create this in Excel. So the first thing we are going to do is to find the variance. Okay, the way our signs are is going to just be actual minus budget. Okay, so it means that for corporate, okay, they have overspent because we gave them 3 million and then they've spent 4 million, right? If I switch to sales, okay, they brought in a positive variance, right? Now what we want to do is that if this number is positive, okay, let me just format this properly. So if this number is positive, we want to show a green icon, but if it's negative, we want to show a red icon, right? We can bring in these icons using inserts, okay? So in the illustrations group, I can insert icons. So when the icons open up, I'm looking for minus, okay? So minus is here, okay, and then I'll also look for plus. I'll also look for plus while I'm here, right? So I've selected these two icons, okay? This is available in Microsoft 365. So I will insert these two icons, okay? When these two icons are added, I just need to format them properly, okay? So in Excel, the icon is a graphic, so I can now come in here and then apply the right color. So green is going to be for the plus, and then I'll come here, select this, and then I'll choose red for this one. Okay. Now the good thing about these icons is that when I select them, I have the option to place them directly inside the cell, right? So look out for this icon. Okay, so when I click this, you realize that it goes into the cell, very neat. And then when I do this one as well, it also goes into the cell. Okay, you can always rearrange. I can cut this and then bring it down here. Okay, so these are now in cells. So I'm now going to write a formula. Okay, so let me choose label for this. My formula is going to be if this variance is greater than 0, okay, then bring this icon. Otherwise, bring this icon, which is the red. Okay, so it's a very simple if formula. So if we now come in here and then we switch our departments, this is a positive variance, this is negative, right? So that's how we are going to take advantage of this place image in cell feature, right? So if you are using 365, this feature should be available to you. So the last calculation that we are going to do is the calculation that allows us to know which scenario we have selected. Now this is important because we are going to be using it for our lookup. So when I switch to budgets and I switch to actual, I need a cell to show me which scenario I've selected so that I can use that to bring the right values into the summary. Okay, we can do that using Excel's cube rank member. This is my slicer, right? So the slicer is called scenario. I can use the function cube rank member. So cube rank member goes into the data model. Okay. Now the set expression is the slicer that you are interested in. So when you type SL, it lists the list of slicers for you. I'm interested in scenario. Okay. Then comma, rank is 1 for the selected item, which is always number 1. Okay, and then I'll close my bracket. So with this now shows what you have selected in the cell. We'll take advantage of this to do our lookup calculation. If you haven't selected anything, it reads all. In dashboard, and you can also take advantage of this to show blanks or any other output that you want. Okay, so at this point, we are ready to create our final dashboard. We've gone through all our calculations. So with dashboards, you have to start with what we call a mockup or create your wireframes. Now, there are best practices when you are laying out your dashboard. The first thing that you need to pay attention to is the use of margins, right? So realize that column A, C, F, I, and then the last column here, V, right, have been set as margins to make it easier to separate the objects that you use in your dashboard. Apart from that, column B is our main column that has the labels. Okay, then D and E, and then we have the rest. We've also hidden unused columns to make it easier to navigate. Okay, so we are going to lay this out, but before that, let's rename our sheet calculations, and then we are going to create a new sheet for our dashboard. Okay, so this is going to be our dashboard. Okay, now the next thing that we are going to do is to highlight the entire range, okay, and then use our background color. The theme for this design is a dark mode design. The hex codes for the various colors that have been used here is in the PDF that will be shared in this video, right? So for the main theme, which is a version of purple, we are going to use this hex code. I'm going to copy this, and then I'll come to my Excel sheet, go to home, and then in the field, I'll choose more colors. Okay, come to custom, and then in the hex code field, I'll paste in this one. Okay, so this is going to set the stage for everything I'm going to do. Now, while this entire area is selected, I'll come and choose my font. I prefer to design with a red hat display font. You can also choose Arial or Montserrat, any font that you feel would fit your design. You can choose it from this point. Now, from this point, my font color is going to be white, so I'll choose white here, and then I'll set my font size to 10.5. Okay, so this will now give me the background that I need. The next thing I'm going to do is to set the margins, right? So as I indicated, A, C, F, I, and V, okay, are your margins. Now, this is not cast in stone, okay? So when it comes to setting your margins, normally you do it at the back of your envelope. You can iterate as you go, right? So I'll highlight column A, C, F, I, right? Then I'll move all the way to the right, still holding Control, and then select V, right? So I'll now reduce the column width. I can use the Alt keys, Alt, H for home, O for format, and then W for column width, right? So I'll put in column width of 2, right? So this will be my margin. Then for column B, I'll set this to 33, okay? D and E, I'm going to set it to 13, and then G and H2, I'm going to set to 13. Okay, and then for the rest, from J to U, I'm going to set this to 10.5. Okay, so it means that my main dashboard area is from column A to V. I will not need W onwards, so I'll select column W, Control Shift right, and then hide these using Control close brackets. Okay, so this will now give me column A to V. Now to see all the columns in view, I will stand in column A, Control Shift right, just to select the entire width of the page, zoom to selection. So I'll do that under View, choose Zoom to selection. Okay, so this now places everything in view. Okay. So that is the stage for your dashboard. Now the next thing that we are going to do is to put in the border lines. We are going to use these border lines to also create the areas for these cards and then the summary tables that we have down here, right? So again, the color that we've chosen for the border lines is this one. So I'm going to highlight this, Control C, and then come to my Excel sheet. Okay, so come to Home here and then change my line color from More Colors. I'll come to Custom, and then this hex code is what I'm going to use. Okay, so it's a shade of gray. Okay, now I'm going to use the finished work as a guide. Okay, so the first box is from B9 to B17. Okay, so I'm going to select B9 to B17. I'll come in here and then draw my outside borders. Okay, so this is useful so that you know where to place each element. The next one is a similar shape. I'll highlight D9 to E17. Right, now I can repeat the formatting with function F4. Okay, so and then also put in F4 for this one as well. Okay, so this will now represent my 3 boxes. Then when I step into the summary tables below, okay, my first summary table comes from B21 to B38, right? So I'll highlight B21 to B38. This time around, I'm going to use the all borders. Okay, so this is for my summary table, and then I'm going to repeat the same thing for these 2 ranges. So I'll highlight these 2, okay, and then press F4. Right, so these 2 now represent my actual and budget summaries. Right, then the final label that I'm going to put in is the range for the month labels. So that is going to come from J to U. So again, I'll highlight this and then press F4 to put in the border lines. Okay, so this way we are able to see where the final outputs, the summary tables, and then the cards are going to be. We place our 2 charts over here. Okay, and then we bring in our slices. Now, the last thing we're going to do in terms of the formatting is to fill in the headers, right? So you notice that I have special headers for the summary tables. So that one is this color. So the 4th one that we have here, I'm going to highlight this, Control C, and then I'll come, select this, Control select. Please make sure the Control key is held down as you select this, so it maintains your previous selection. And I'll come home, in the fill, come to More Colors, and then I'm going to paste in what I just copied. Okay, so this is going to be my fill color for the headers. While I'm here, let me just take advantage and then bold in the font as well. Okay, so now I can put in my labels. This is account name, this is actual, this is budget, right? This is the percentage spent, this is the status, and then I have January going all the way to December. Okay, so then I'll repeat same for these net labels. So this is where our totals are going to be. So I'll come and then repeat same for this. So this is going to be net, right? And then the rest are going to be calculations. Okay. So this now gives us an idea where to bring our various elements. The next thing that we're going to do is to come to our calculations, okay, and then bring in our slices and charts, which collectively are known as objects. So I'll come home, come to find and select, okay, this icon here, and then I'll go to special, right, and then select all objects. Okay, so I'll click OK. It highlights all the objects in here. Control X to cut. Now temporarily, because the sliders are off, we get some errors, right? It will be restored once you paste them. So I'll come here and then paste this. I'll paste everything. Okay. So let's take advantage and then arrange these properly. So I will now arrange my slices, put them in place, stretch this all the way to D, and I'll place my charts. For now, it's just about placement, okay? We'll just spend some time and then format this appropriately. Okay. So this is now the staging for my dashboard. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is now take these elements and then format them appropriately to be able to achieve this final goal. Okay, next up, we want to format our slices, right? So you notice the theme we are using for the slices is for the button that we've selected is gold with a black font. The button that we have not selected is white with a black font. Our headers is a white, okay, with a white borderline, and our background is transparent, which actually takes the same color as our background for the dashboard. Now with this, we can now go and set the appropriate style for our slicer. We begin by selecting an existing slicer, go to the slicer tab, click, and then duplicate any existing slicer. So let's name this Finex. Okay, now the whole slicer here is an element that represents the frame. Okay, so here you can set the background and some fonts and all that. The header is what you see here, the scenario and then the line. The selected item with data is the button that has been selected. You can change the color and the font color as well. Then selected item with data, there are scenarios where what you've selected doesn't have any data. You can change the color for that as well. And then the unselected item is the other side, what you have not selected, okay, the budget side. Okay, when you are setting your slicer or modifying the style, you don't have to do all of these. Just the first 5 will normally suffice. Okay, so we'll begin the process by selecting the whole slicer. We'll come to format. We'll go through 3 main tabs, set the font, set the borderline, and then the fill. Okay, so for our font, we are going to use the Red Hat display, which is my custom font. You can use any other if you prefer. Okay, so this is my Red Hat display. So I'll highlight and copy this so that I don't have to scroll down in subsequent ones. The font style, I'm going to bolden this and then choose 14. Okay. The border, I'm going to choose none. Okay, so there won't be any borderline. And then the fill, this is very important because we want to maintain a transparent fill. The fill is going to be the same color as our background. Okay, so I'll come to more colors, come to custom, and we already have the original color. So this is the original color. Okay, so 111340. So this is what we have. Okay, so this will now complete the settings for the whole slicer. All right, now let's come to the header. So for the header, we'll come to format, come to the font style. I'll choose Red Hat display. Okay, so I'll select this. I'll bolden this. Now the color is going to be white. Okay, and then I'll set this to 12. Then switch to border. Now for the border for our line, this is going to be white. When you choose the white, please remember to choose the border type. Okay, this is an underline. So you click on these 2 buttons. Okay, and then the fill is going to be no color. Okay. Then selected item with data, which is the gold part. we'll click on Format, come to Font. Again, we'll maintain our Red Hat display, and then bold this font is 12. And then for the border, we are going to choose None. And then for the fill, we are going to choose the gold fill. Okay, so this is what we have. Now you see a preview of what you are creating to the right. Okay, then we'll skip the selected item with no data and then come to the unselected item with data. That's the budget side. So for that, again, we'll maintain the same font. Okay, we'll bolden this and then choose 12. Okay, there will be no borderline for this, and then the font is going to be white. Okay, so these settings should be enough, but you can always come back and then modify if it doesn't turn out well. So if you are done with this, you can click OK. Now to see your new slicer, you come back to the slicer, then you see it in the first position. So you click on this, and then you notice that your slicer turns out the way you wanted it. I'll select this, and then I'll select the second slicer as well. Okay, so this is what we want. So next up, let's format our charts. Okay, the thing with formatting charts is you need to reduce the noise, remove all elements that are not useful. So chart title goes off. Okay, then we have our labels in place. I will take off our grid lines. Okay, so let me switch to the positive numbers. So we now have this. Now, first thing we are going to do is to make the background transparent. So we'll choose a no fill. Okay, and then while we are here, we'll change the color to white, and then we have Red Hat display for this. We're going to take off the labels. So these labels will be placed on top of the lines. Now you notice that we are going to be formatting actual and budget. Okay, so we'll do this in two steps. First, the actual display. So for the actual display, I'll highlight the series, which is the line here, press Ctrl 1. So usually for the typical Windows laptop, Ctrl 1 allows you to see all the settings on your chart. So when I come here, I'm going to change the color of the line to the gold to represent the actual, and then the width, I'm going to reduce this to 1. Okay, so those are the changes that we are going to do here. Now I'll switch to the marker. So for the marker options, this is the type that we've chosen, but I'll increase this a bit to 7 for contrast. Right, and then the fill, I'm going to choose a solid fill and then maintain the same gold color for this. Okay, so once we are done with that, we can now come and then add our labels, right? So I'll click on the plus sign and then add our labels. Right, it's a bit heavy on the chart, so we need to truncate this. So I'll select these labels, press Ctrl 1 again. Okay, so this now brings me to the labels options, but I'm here for the number formatting, right? So I'll open up the number formatting, drop this down, and then choose custom, right? Now, I already have this custom code, hash, comma, hash, hash 0, dot 00. Okay, so this is formatting it by taking off 6 zeros and replacing it with an M, right? Their formats will be 0.00, 2 commas, and then you put your M in double quotes. Okay, you can also use this as well, right? So this is going to be my formatting. We'll maintain the same for the budget. So if you are done, it looks something like this. Okay, so if you like, you can also change the labels into the gold color, okay, just to be consistent. Okay, so this now completes the actual series. Now let's switch to the budget. So the budget will maintain the same style. Select Ctrl 1, come to my line. So I'll change this to white and reduce the width to 1 point. Okay, so that completes the line, and then from here I'll switch to the marker. So for the marker options, this is the type we have. I'll increase this to 7. and then change the color to white, okay, to be consistent. So now that we have this, I can now add my data labels. So it's a bit clumsy over here, but when I press Ctrl 1, I get the option to apply the same custom formatting that we used for. Okay, so we have something like this. Okay, now we'll take off the border lines for the chart. So I'll select and then choose no outline. Okay, now you notice that we have some border lines on the markers. You can always come back here and then in the marker, choose no line for the border line. Okay, so this gives us the neat display. So this is my actual. I'll do same for this one as well. Ctrl 1. I'll come in here and then for the borderline choose no borderline. Okay, so I have something like this. Right. So this will now give us the switch between our actual and our budget. Now let's pay attention to our donut chart. So for our donut chart, basically what we want is just the ring or the slice in our donut chart. So I'll come to format, shape fill, no fill. Okay, while I'm here, no outline for this as well. Now select the slice. Okay, this I'm going to also take off the border lines, so no outline for this. Now I'm going to select the actual, so you can click on this slice twice just to be sure that you selected the series for the actual. Okay, press Ctrl 1 and then change this color to the gold color, okay, that we had. So it's going to show something like this, and then click on the orange part, which is the balance. Okay, so that's, you can even do it directly here and then fill this with white. Okay, so just to be consistent. Okay, so this will now show us example for operations that they've spent close to the 100% mark. Now you can bring in the label. So to bring in the label, I can go to insert text box, choose text box, and then draw the text box nicely in the middle. Okay, so if you draw the text box, just select the border line of the text box and then stand in the formula bar. So in the formula bar, you put in an equal to, okay, and then you come to your calculations, right? So this is the label that we were looking for, the 82%, okay? So I'll press enter. Now I'll middle and center align this, okay? Increase the font. In the shape format, I'll choose a no fill and then no outline, and then set the fonts to white. Okay, so this should give me this display. You can maintain the same font or you can change it to red hat display just to be consistent. Okay, so yeah, you test it for the rest of the departments. Okay, and then that completes the formatting for the two charts. Right, next up, we want to look at the summary tables below and then how to fill in and then bring in the conditional formats as well. Okay, so now we want to bring in the labels for our accounts and then also set the conditional formatting for them as well. Right, now these calculations have been done already, so it's from our main stage in the pivot table. Okay, so this is the list of account names that we want to bring in. Okay, now we are going to use a lookup formula to bring this. So to be able to bring in these labels, we are going to create a number series over here, which we are going to use as a lookup array. Okay, so I'll type 1 in the first cell, drag this down, and then choose fill series. Okay, now the reason we are doing this is we want to do a lookup, okay, and then bring it into this side of the dashboard. Right, we can use VLOOKUP, we can use index match, we can use XLOOKUP. So I'm going to use index match for this. Right, so I'll stand in the first cell and then start index. Okay, You can also look in the formula bar. Now, when I bring index, I am interested in my results column or my area, right? So this is column B and it has my labels, right? I'm going to select the whole of column B. So I'll go to the top B to B. I'm doing this because this column A would have my labels to bring the results that I'm looking for. So B to B is my result area. Then I'll bring a comma, okay? Then introduce match. So for match, I need a lookup value, okay? So the lookup value will be any of these numbers. Now I can get that from my dashboard. So which one is position 1? Now instead of typing in 1, I'm going to use this function called rows. Okay, so I'll open up rows. Rows basically counts the number of rows you have selected, right? So I'm going to select A22, okay, and then bring a column, right? So when I bring a column, it duplicates the cell reference. So at this point, I've selected A22 to A22. Now, I'll be copying this down. So as I copy down, you realize that the second part of this would keep increasing, and that will give me the count of rows and the number series that I want. So I'll lock the first 22, row 22, put a dollar sign over here, okay, and then close my brackets for rows. So this will be my lookup value. You realize it's giving me 1 because I've selected only 1 row. Then I'll bring a comma. My lookup array is where I can find the number series on the other side. So I'll come to calculations. My number series is in column A. I'll highlight A to A just to be consistent with the earlier selection of B to B. Okay, when you're doing this, ensure that you don't have any number series apart from this set in column A. Otherwise, you get errors. Then I'll conclude with a match type, comma, and I'll choose the exact match for this. Close my bracket for match, close my bracket for index, and I'll press enter. So when I copy this down, I'll highlight and press Ctrl D. Realize that I have my labels in here. Now I also want to bring in my actual, right? If you look at the calculations that we did, my total actual lives in column C, and then my total budget also lives in column D. Earlier we picked our labels from column B, so we'll just take advantage of the formula that we did here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this. So I'll come and stand in here. Now instead of B to B, I'm going to change this from C to C. Okay, so this should bring me my actual labels. So I'll come here, Ctrl D, and then copy this down. Okay, now for the budget labels, it's currently blank because our scenario selected is the budget. Okay, we don't want a situation where this switch controls these two summary columns. So what we want to do is, in this calculation, we want to back out the slicer for scenario. Okay, so you realize that there was a scenario slicer input here. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this, including the comma, Ctrl C to copy. Okay, highlight this range, okay, and then Ctrl H. This is find and replace. Okay, so in the find and replace dialog box, I'm pasting slicer scenario and I'm replacing it with nothing. Okay, so when I do this, you realize that I now have my total actual and total budget in place. Okay, this way I copy my original formula and then I paste it here. Okay, I can now change this from C to D. Okay, this is now going to fetch the budget. I'll highlight this and then copy this down. Okay, so this now brings in my actual and my budget. Now we want to find the percentage, which we can calculate here. So I'll come, select actual and then divide by percentage. Okay, I'll highlight this, Ctrl D to copy this down, Ctrl Shift percentage, okay, to convert this into percentages. Okay, I can center this nicely over here. Now, there are situations where you find an error if there is no number for the selected department. Okay, so we can take advantage of this and then modify our formula with an if error. So if the formula throws an error, we rather want a blank instead. Okay, so I'll modify this so that we have a blank instead of this. So the next thing that we want to do is to put in our 3 icon sets. Okay, the logic for sales is that if they sell more than 67% is a green. For the rest, which are the outflows, if we spend more than 67% is a red. Okay, so we'll do it in 2 sets. Okay, first for the expenses and then we'll do for the sales. Okay, now to do that, I'm going to basically reference the same percentages here. Okay, I'll copy this down. Now that we have this, I'm going to select just the expenses, excluding the sales, come home, and then choose conditional formatting. So over here, we use the 3 icon sets. So in the 3 icon sets, I'll go to more rules, right? So basically what we want to achieve here is we want to reverse the icon order. Okay, so I'll choose reverse icon order. That's when the value is more than 67%. We want to convert this to a number. Okay, so this is going to be 0.67, and then we change same for this one. We'll make this 0.33. Okay, and then for the rest, when we are under 33% spending, is green. I'll choose show icon only, and then I'll click OK. Okay, so this will now give me for the expenses or the outflows. Okay, now I'll do a different set for the sales, which is basically going to be the same, but we'll reverse the icon. So I'll come to more rules. Okay, so this green, yellow, red, the order is fine for us. We'll show icon only, do the same thing. So this is going to be 0.67 and then 3 for the middle range. I'll set this to a number as well. And then for revenue below 33%, we have red. Okay, so I'll choose this and then center this as well. Right, so this will now complete the staging for our dashboard for our summary tables. Okay, so while we are here, we can now put in our nets for actual and budget. So Alt equal to, and then I'll just select this for my sum. Okay, and then Control R to copy this right. Okay, Alt H9, Alt H9. Okay, so just to be sure, if I select this, I get our 82 and then our 79. So if you have these two, then we can basically repeat the formula that we did for this one as well. Okay, it picks up the other formula as well. So I'll format this and then center. So for our net position, we'll apply the logic for the sales to this. Okay, format this properly with a percentage. So this will now complete our summary table. Okay, next up, we are going to bring in our lookup values for our monthly actual or budget. Okay, so for our final lookup summary table, which basically breaks down actual or budget by month and also by account name. Okay, we are going to be using a lookup formula called index match match. Now, what this formula does is that it takes the account name, okay, and the month name, okay, and also combine the month name with the scenario selected, right? So example, if I'm looking for sales for January, okay, for actual, the lookup values I'm going to use is sales, okay, and a combination of January and the actual selection, okay, then that will bring the value from the staging that we did earlier. So remember, when we were staging, we did the calculations over here, right? So if you come to our main calculation, you recall that we use cube rank member to fetch what has been selected over here. So when I select actual or budget, it shows up in that cell. Okay, so this output, we want to join the selected month to this output and then match it to look up the particular column combination that we are looking for. Okay, Now, January and actual are currently sitting in different labels or cells. So we are going to create a concatenation. So first we have to join January and actual. Okay. So this way we can have the month and then the selected scenario together. So I'll take this all the way to the right. Okay. So Control R. Now you notice that this December is not filled in properly, so I'll put in this here. So it should end at December budget, right? So with this lookup array in place, we can now match on the row side with the account. Then we can match on the column side with the scenario selected and the month. Okay, so I'll take this slowly so that you can follow. So I'll start with equal to index. Okay, now index always takes the result area. So for my result area, I'll come to my calculations, start from January actual, okay, all the way to the last account, and then I'll go all the way to December. Okay, so my result can come from any of the numbers in this range. When you select this, please ensure that you lock this absolutely. So F4, okay, $ on both row and column. Then I'll bring a comma and then introduce match. So this match is how we want to look up on the row side using the account labels, right? For this side, the lookup value is going to come from the dashboard. So in the dashboard, I'm going to select this sales, okay, which is currently in B22. Now I want to fix column B because I'll be copying right? I don't want column B to shift. So F4, F4, F4 on column B. So that is my lookup value. Then I'll bring a comma. For the lookup value I've selected, the corresponding lookup array is on the other side. So I'll come to my location, I'll come to my calculations, and then select this range of account labels. Right. So this one I'm going to lock absolutely. F4 $ on both column and row. Okay. Then I'll conclude with a comma. The exact match option is what I will choose 0. So I'll close this for match. So this completes the matching on the row side. Okay. Then let's do for the column side. So for the column side, I'll bring a column, I'll bring a comma, and then introduce match again. Right. My lookup value is a combination of the month and then the scenario selected. So I'll come to my dashboard, okay, and then select this month. Okay. Now when I select this month, I want the columns to change, okay, but I don't want the row to move down. So I'll bring an F4 $ against 21, right? And then join this with an ampersand, okay, with the scenario that has been selected. That one I can find it in the budget, in the calculation sheet. Please, when you select this, this has to be locked absolutely as well. It's a combination of the month and the scenario selected. That's going to be the lookup array, right? Now, I'll bring a comma, and then this lookup array is going to be matched with the row I just created by combining the month and the scenario. So I'll select this all the way to the end, okay? F4 to lock this absolutely, then comma, and I'll choose exact match for this side and conclude that as well. And I'll close this, okay? So let me go back and then display the full formula. So first, index takes the result area, match takes the account value, matches it with the account names in the calculation, okay? So that is the row side, okay? And then the column side is going to be a combination of the month selected and then the scenario selected, which will now be joined with a concatenated row, which I have here, okay? So let's see what we have. When I press enter, I get this. So I can now copy this right, Control R, come all the way down, Control D for this as well, okay? Let's see if this is working for actual. So I have this for actual and I have this for budget, right? Then I can now come highlight the whole of this, Alt equal to, okay, for my final numbers, Alt H9, Alt H9, okay, to take up the 2 decimal place. Right, so this will now complete our summary table. We are just left with our final shapes here. So this is the shape for our actual, our budget, and then our variance. Okay, so these are regular shapes formatted with a gradient fill, and then we'll bring in our image in the background. Right, so let's get to this. We already have a layout marked with a borderline, so using this as a guide, we'll go to insert and then insert a regular shape, okay, a rectangle. Right, we just use it as a guide and then draw it in that area. Now normally if you want to snap it to the grid, you can hold the Alt key, okay, so that you just snap it to the cells, okay, nicely. Okay, so this is going to be our shape. Now the way we're going to do this, we'll do everything for the first one and then duplicate for the rest. Now the shape fill for this is going to be a gradient fill. As always, you can select the shape, press Ctrl 1, okay, and then you come and then you choose gradient fill. Okay, now my gradient fill is already preset, but I'm going to take you through the steps one by one. So for the type that we chose a radial, okay, and then the direction is the first one. Okay, now so we have 4 stops. Okay, so each stop has the original color that we used. Okay, so for each stop we set the transparency to 85%. Okay, so I'll set this to 85%. So this is also going to be 85%. And then for our white stop, we'll set this at 75. Okay, so that is how we set the gradient, right? So this will give it this transparent glass feel. Now, the last thing that we need to do is to set the borderline. So this is going to be a white borderline. We'll reduce the width to 0.5 and then increase the transparency to 85%. Okay, right. So if you did it correctly, you should have this display. Okay, now once we've done this, we want to bring in our labels. So our labels will be sitting in as we have it here. Remember, we did our calculations at the backstage. Okay, so this is the calculation that we want to bring in. Before we bring it in, it will be good to truncate. Okay, so I'm going to highlight these numbers, press Ctrl 1, and then come to number. Then in the custom, I'm going to put in the format 0.00, okay, which is 2 decimal place, comma, comma. Each comma takes off 3 zeros to knock off the million part, and then double quote, M double quote. Okay, so this will format this properly. So this way, it will be easier on the eye when I bring it into the card. So I'll select the shape, come to my formula bar, bring in an equal sign, and then I'll select for my actual. Now you notice that it's not that visible. Okay, so I'll select it, increase the font to about 32, middle and center align, bolden this, and then make the font white. Okay, so I have something like this. So this will now complete the label for the actual. I'll just duplicate it for the budget and the variance. So click, select it, Control Shift, hold it, and then slide it to the right. Okay, so here you can resize using the Alt to snap it to the edges of the cell. So the earlier calculation is for actual. This one is for budget, which is in C33. So I'll come here and then change this to C33 and then press enter. I'll use the format, but I'll come back here and then correct this. Then I'll duplicate the same for this one as well. This one should fit in nicely because the same shape. So I'll select this one, and this is going to be C34. Okay, so my numbers are here, but I can format with the first format. I'll select this, double click my format painter, and then I'll touch this and I'll touch that as well. Okay, So if it helps, you can highlight this and then set this to match your font style. So this is what I have. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is, remember the border lines that were behind. I can highlight this and then take off the border lines. Okay, so I'm just left with just the shapes. Okay, so we are almost there. Now, this is transparent. It has a glass feel. So anything that happens in the background will still be visible. Okay, so I will take advantage of this transparency and then bring in the image in cell. Okay, so I'll highlight the second cell and the third cell. Okay, come to home and then merge and center. All right, so this way I have a bigger space for my icon. So with this merged area, I'll stand in and bring an equal to, come to my calculations. Okay, remember this is where we had the switch of the image in cells. Okay, so my label is here. So I'll press enter and then fetch this nicely here. Okay, so what this means is that when we go through our departments, for those that have a negative variance, we have a red, and then for those that have the positive variance, we have the green. We're almost there. The last thing that we want to do is to put in the labels. So I have total, actual, total, budget, variance, trend, and percentage. Right, so let me just quickly do that. So total, actual, and we have our total budget over here. Then we have our variance, and then we have our trend. Let me reposition this chart. So we have our trend, and then we have our percentage chart. Now for all these, I can highlight and then I'll bold in this. Okay. Now what we want is a thick border line to underline these. So I'll select the first one. Okay, come here, change my line color to white. Okay, and then I'll select the thick border line for this one, thick bottom border line, and then I'll center. Right. Now this one is easier because it sits in one column, but for this one that spreads over two columns, in most cases people would like to merge this, but I normally don't like merge cells. There are rare situations like what we used over here, but to maintain the column orientation, you can use another method. So what we'll do is, instead of merging, I'll select the two columns, okay, and then press Ctrl 1, come to alignment, okay, under text alignment, you have the option to center this across the selection. Okay, so when I do that, it gives me the same view. My column orientation is still maintained. Okay, so this one, I can now put in my thick border line, Alt HB H for this. So I'll save time by highlighting these two columns, come to home, double click on the format painter, and then highlight variance over the two columns, highlight trend over the columns that they sit in, okay, and then highlight percentage also over the columns that it sits in. Okay, so this way I've applied the same formats throughout. Right, so final checks just to be sure that everything is working. Right, normally when you run your data through the data model and use Cube Formulas, initially when you are retrieving the data, you get this get pivot data display, but once the slicer goes in, you should be fine. Right, so this brings us to the end of our dashboard. If you're able to come this far, congratulations. I hope you've learned a lot. See if you can use these tips that you've learned to build your own actual and budget dashboard. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you in the next video.
If this video was helpful and you would like to receive more of these videos directly on your WhatsApp, you can send ad to this WhatsApp number. We'll add you to our broadcast list so you receive our videos directly. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Finance Skills Hub. All our old videos are here. Please subscribe for notification of new videos, or connect with us on any of these social media handles. Thank you so much for watching.